Do we know what happened to the Cirrus?
Haven't seen anything.
Oh boy.
Don't see him at all.
A family wiped out in one of the safest small planes ever made. Well, what went wrong? The NTSB has released their preliminary report on the Cirrus that crashed in Sanford, North Carolina on July 7th. Let's go over the shocking details. There are important things that we can learn from this crash. We're going to talk about it in this episode of Taking Off. Hi, I'm Dan Milliken, and we're making this report from EAA Airventure at Oshkosh. And well, this one's especially hard. I've got family that are farmers, and the 4 victims of this crash ran a very popular farm selling fresh vegetables to the community. And I was just out at the family farm picking vegetables before leaving for Airventure, and it hits close to home. You know, I didn't know the Buchanan family, but they had made a huge impact in Sanford, North Carolina. The dad was Travis, the wife and mother Candace, and 2 beautiful children, ages 10 and 9. We're going to go over the prelim report because there are some very important things that we can all take away that can make us better and safer. And I'll get to that, but first, let's set the stage. The Buchanans were finished with their Florida vacation that started on July 3rd. Travis had bought an SR22, a Cirrus, almost 2 years before. It was a newer plane. It was built in 2012. It's a G3 that's a 3rd generation of the Cirrus SR22. It's perfect for a small family and safe, very safe. The Cirrus is one of those planes that made its reputation for having a built-in parachute system for the plane itself. And as of June 2025, there have been 136 successful deployments of their parachute system across all the Cirrus aircraft. And when Cirrus first started selling aircraft in 1999, things were not as rosy. In 2004, fatal accident rates peaked at 2.6 per 100,000 flight hours, which was roughly double the general aviation average. Cirrus took note, and they started implementing significant changes that reduced the rate to 0.42 by 2014, one of the best in the industry. They enhanced pilot training, especially with the CAPS usage, the parachute. They offered a free transition training for buyers of used Cirrus aircraft, which included up to 3 days training with Cirrus standardized instructor pilots called CSIPs. And that was free of charge. All you had to do was show up and be trained. In the training, there is also a focus on how the electrical system works, and it teaches pilots how to calculate how long a battery will last. And in this case, Travis would have qualified for the free training, and I've no doubt that the NTSB will examine that to see if he took advantage. In addition to the training, Cirrus enhanced the SR22 model, starting with the G3 in 2007, and the culture change was huge among the Cirrus pilots, becoming one of the safest general aviation planes on the market today. So why didn't that safety work here? Well, we'll get to that. Having finished the vacation, Travis and his family departed Cocoa Merritt Island Airport, nestled right there in the middle of Kennedy Space Center at 11:03 a.m. Eastern. The destination was Raleigh Executive in Sanford, North Carolina. It's about a 2-hour flight. We don't know what level of weather briefing that Travis got, or even what level of pre-flight that Travis did. What we do know from the NTSB preliminary report is that the safety pin for the parachute system, the CAPS system, was still in place in the wreckage. This is a pre-flight item to remove on the Cirrus checklist, though some moved that step to the before flight checklist after passengers are on to make sure it's not armed in case someone would try to grab the handle to steady themselves climbing in. But it is a pre-flight or before flight checklist item. It was not done in this case. The family of 4 got on the plane and they took off. Approximately 26 minutes into the flight, according to FlightAware and Live ATC, Travis reached out to approach. He's having radio issues, and that on its own is not an emergency. Flying visual flight rules outside of weather, that's not a showstopper. To fly VFR in the US, a radio is not required in most airspace. But he goes on with this.
Orlando approach, do you have me? Or Jacksonville Center, do you have a copy? 5-6 flight. Our radio is going in and out, not sure what's going on, but we seem to be having some type of an electrical problem, so if you lose us, you might want that noted in your system. VFR currently to Tango Tango Alpha, if you can hear me.
And this is really the first sign of trouble. He says the words electrical problem. Look, I own a 1980 Cessna 210, and 2 weeks ago on a cross country, I had trouble with my Radio 1. I also have a Radio 2, as a lot of planes do. And this Cirrus probably had 2 radios. And in my flight bag, I carry a handheld I can use in an emergency. And I know other pilots who do the same. If Radio 1 goes on the fritz, you move to Radio 2. If it's a complete electrical failure, then I have my handheld. Now, if my simple 1980 Cessna has an electrical failure, it's not an issue for the engine or the fuel system. The gravity-fed fuel tanks from the high wing, I've never really even needed to turn on the fuel pumps in flight, but the Cirrus is different. It has a boost pump, and some keep it on the whole time. You for sure want it on everything but maybe cruise flight. And the Cirrus has 2 alternators and 2 batteries. Complete electrical failure would be rare, but he's saying that he has some kind of electrical problem.
We seem to be having some type of an electrical problem.
He's not even half an hour into his trip, and that would put him somewhere close to the Daytona Beach, large class Charlie Airport. Off his wing closer still is New Smyrna Beach Municipal, a towered class Delta airport. And looking at the sectional, there's airports all up the beach. With the electrical failure, the plane continues heading north, handrailing the coast. At one point, getting pretty far out over the water with an electrical problem. The NTSB prelim doesn't have anything to say about this part of the trip where they lost communication to the point where they approached the Raleigh Executive, their destination, which is an untowered airport. The fixed-based operator, the FBO, got a call from Candace, Travis's wife, in the Cirrus, and she told the FBO, she told them that they did not have navigational or communication equipment and wanted to know which runway was active and the wind speed and direction. If Travis lost radios and navigation, that means no autopilot. He would have to fly by compass or by visual ground references, unless he had an iPad with Garmin Pilot or ForeFlight that he could use, which, based on his pretty straight track over the ground, I would assume he did have something. After the phone call to the FBO, the operator made an announcement over the airport's Unicom frequency, advising the 2 pilots that were in the pattern of the incoming Cirrus with comm failure.
Raleigh Exec Unicom, this is FBO. Please be advised there's a Cirrus November 5656 Mike, about 3 miles south of the field. They're wanting to come in runway 03. They are potential engine failure. They have no communications.
Then Candace told the FBO operator that they were now having engine trouble and needed to come in straight in for an emergency landing. That was the last communication with the stricken airplane.
Raleigh Exec Unicom, any updates on that inbound aircraft in distress?
Do we know what happened to the Cirrus?
Well, he was 3 miles out. I've been out here 5 miles out for a while. Haven't seen anything.
Oh boy.
I don't see him at all.
The airplane was located in an open field about 5 miles from the airport, with the wreckage being oriented about 180 degrees opposite direction of travel. All 4 people on board perished, 3 at the crash site and 1 at the hospital. The preliminary report goes on to mention the condition of the various systems with a focus on the fuel system. The left tank had not been breached, but it was empty of fuel. So the plane had drained the left tank in flight. The right tank had been breached and contained 3 gallons of what they assume is avgas. The report mentions the fuel gauges are electrical. The fuel selector switch was found in the right tank position. So if Travis had a full electrical failure, he would not have been able to know what the quantity of fuel was in each tank. The usual procedure would be to time your fuel tank switches and do the math based on how much you burn. If you burn 16 gallons an hour, you'd make the calculation. In the Cirrus, standard procedure is to run your boost pump to help maintain fuel pressure. There is a risk if you've got an empty tank of introducing air into the fuel system, which could cause the engine to run rough or even quit. And you can vapor lock the fuel system, and this is where air or fuel vapor forms a barrier inside the lines, basically blocking the flow of fuel. Now, I'm talking in a broad sense about what the systems are. We have no idea what happened in this specific case, and I'm going to speculate for a moment. I talked to some Cirrus experts, and I had several of them tell me that this looks exactly like a fuel starvation issue. All right, so fuel exhaustion is where there is no more fuel. Fuel starvation is where there's fuel, but it just can't get to the engine. With the possibility he had no way of knowing the fuel levels in the tanks, he might have tried to switch tanks and there was just too much air in the system. With the left tank being unbreached and bone dry, Travis for sure had fuel exhaustion at least once. Okay, back to the report. The NTSB report mentions the safety pin for the CAPS system being left in place, which we already covered. One more note on that. While it is a pre-flight checklist, if you were to have an emergency and you needed to pull the CAPS system in flight, it's not a whole bunch more to pull the pin and then deploy the caps. It also mentions one magneto gave spark and the other was too damaged and the crankshaft turned a few degrees before hitting the oil sump housing that had been driven up into it. It's unclear by the report whether this was a result of the impact or if it happened prior to crash. The Cirrus does have a recoverable data module, an RDM, that will have crucial information on it, and it was found and it was sent to the NTSB lab. The weather at the crash site was VMC, visual meteorological conditions, so they could see. But the report also lists the ceilings as broken at 1,400 feet AGL. Now, I'm confused by this. That's considered marginal VFR, and that would mean that as they were descending, they would have most likely been in the clouds. Honestly, I wonder if this is just a typo in the report, because everything else was saying it was clear, visibility was great. If it was a 1,400 foot ceiling, going through the clouds with no instruments would have been really difficult, and I don't know if they had a non-electrical backup attitude indicator on board. In the preliminary report is no mention of Travis's pilot training, his certificates, or his currency. But a search of the FAA Airmen's database does show that he got his most recent third-class medical in November of 2023, and his private pilot certificate is listed as January 22nd, 2024, around the same time as the registration of the change of ownership of the airplane. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean he got his private pilot certificate on that date. It just means that that's the latest info the FAA has. If you have a change of address or something like that, the more recent date will show up on the web. And I'll be honest, it's so hard to not speculate on this crash, but we do not have all the details, and what might be obvious might not be what happened. Even so, there are things that I can take away from this, especially as I'm traveling right now in my own small plane. First, this tragedy reminds me that having something like a 3-strike rule can be extremely beneficial. When it's black and white, you know, it's easy to make the call. Engine quit? Well, yeah, we're gonna land. I know we're gonna be diverting. But the gray things, radio stops working, not necessarily an emergency, but I would call it a strike. Family on board? I'd call that a strike. Some of you might not, but having other passengers on my plane, I do up the safety thresholds. If I was flying a Cirrus, knowing I might have electrical problems that could affect fuel flow, I'd call that strike 3. And I'd look for a good place to land and use that most important safety device any of us have in our flight bag, the credit card. Worst case, the family gets to extend the vacation a little. And again, I'm not saying any of this happened in this case. I'm just saying it's a good reminder to me as I fly. Another reminder is to not turn a problem into a real emergency. And I think of the recent crashes where a door pops open and the plane ended up crashing. I need to make sure that I don't let a problem, that my focus on that problem, keep me from flying the airplane. And lastly, this is a reminder to me of what I say on these reports at the end. Superior judgment trumps superior skills. You know, I say that to me first. Because honestly, you know, I might have made the same call Travis made early on in my flying. That saying is for me. You can use it if you want, but it's a reminder to myself. I tend to think I'm Han Solo, that I can skill my way out of anything. And that's a hazardous attitude, and I'm prone to it. So when I study crashes like this, it reminds me to think sound judgment over skills. And once more, I'm not saying that Travis had poor judgment. We don't know yet, and won't know until the final report, which is probably a year to 18 months away. And I hope you can take some of these reminders to heart as well, so that can make you a better pilot or a better person. And I'm going to add this real quick. On the way to Airventure on this trip, I was flying my Cessna 210, and I had researched this Cirrus crash the night before we left, because I meant to try to get this video out before that. And on the flight, 20 minutes or so outside of our destination, I had a burning smell in the cabin, and the low voltage, the alternator, popped on. And having studied all this and preached everything, I went ahead and declared, because it's better to declare and not have the emergency than to have the emergency and not have declared. So I followed my own advice, and I'm not saying I would have 2 years ago, but now, you know, studying all these reports, it's made me a safer pilot. I declared for the first time. I landed, the fire trucks were waiting for us, and you know what? It was okay. And it took me a few minutes to answer, you know, the questions for the fire chief in the form, and I know in about 3 weeks I'll get a call from the FSDO, and that call will probably take 5 minutes. Calling an emergency, as my DPE tells me, and his words were ringing in my ears at that time, calling for emergency is free. Use it when you need it. So that's what I want to leave with you. So thanks for watching, and thanks to our sponsors who make this possible, like Colton Mortgage, coltontakingoff.com. You know, if you're looking for a residential mortgage or refinance, look into Colton. The owner's a pilot, and we like to support the aviation community. And if you got something out of this report, check out our prior one right here. Thanks again for watching, and remember, superior judgment trumps superior skills. Take care.